I'm glad you did mention the word Islamist and Islamism, because this is the root of the problem, and we have to be honest about that. And this is an ideology, it's an idea, and there are some writings, Islamic writings, that are problematic. We have to admit that. There are some writings that appear to advocate violence. And Nadim, you mentioned the Ahmadiyya Muslims earlier. I'm glad you mentioned them, because they are a very peaceful group of Muslims, and they practice Islam in a very peaceful way. But we do have Wahhabis, Salafists and other groups that what I would call Islamists, who would take all of these writings which are problematic and say that they have to be applied literally in all times and all places. Not just 7th century Arabia, but 21st century Britain and France and Germany and Russia and everywhere else there have been Islamist terrorist attacks. And we need to deal with the problem. And we do need to put police back on the street. As Brian said, I would agree, we need 20,000 more police to do community policing, because that's a big hole that's been left after the 20,000 police that have been cut. But we do need to deal with Saudi Qatari funding of Wahhabi and Salafist Islamist mosques.
And also just deal with
this
lady here who lives here and wants to know what she should do because she fears going out because of the colour of her skin and how she's treated.
Well, absolutely. I mean, would say to anybody watching, you know, it's an ideology, it's an idea. It's nothing to do with the colour of your skin, and everyone needs to realise that. You have Hindus and Sikhs as well, same colour skin, but completely different religion, different ideology. But we need to deal with Islamism. And we've got to be honest about that. Everyone should be able to be free to criticize an ideology, to talk about writings in the Quran and the Hadith, to talk about Sharia law. We need to talk about these things. And we need to talk about the ideas there and how they affect people and how they encourage Islamism, which has led to violent mass murders.
Okay.
We need to talk about that. We need to be honest about it. People have real concerns about the level of immigration that we've had over the last 20 years.
Do you not think that that gives permission?
If I can answer, I will finish if you let me. You did ask me a question. We need to address the rapid mass immigration that we've had over the years of Blair, Brown, Cameron and May, which is far, far higher than it was before. People are concerned about the effects on integration in our country. People are also concerned about the effects it's having on housing and on our public services, on our hospitals being overstretched, schools being overstretched.
So there's a big political question here.
But people do want it to be brought back into balance. We need parity of esteem with mental health and physical health, and also social care as well, 3 strands of the health service. And I think that's something that we all agree on across the political spectrum. But you know, I've heard a bit of unreality here from the 2 main parties. I mean, Labour seems to have a magic money tree which doesn't exist, and they're not going to. Jeremy Corbyn comes out like Santa Claus saying, I'm going to give this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, but there's no money there to do all of these things. The Conservatives, you know, they talk about having a strong economy, but they're cutting the NHS to the bone.
So how do you have the extra £9 billion a year that UKIP are promising?
Well, absolutely, £11 billion, and we know where we're going to get it from. We know we're going to get it from Brexit, from not paying our EU membership fees. That's £10 billion a year, and we're also going to cut the overseas development budget back to the useful part of it and not spend the wasteful part of it, giving money to countries with space programs and nuclear weapons, rather than spending it here at home on hospitals, on mental health care, and on investing in our doctors and nurses. And we will be able to re-give out the bursaries to nurses and midwives, and we'll be able to pay back the student fees of students doing STEM subjects, studying medicine, so that if you do study medicine, pharmacy, science and things like that, you will get your fees paid back for you if you work in the NHS for 10 years after you've graduated. So I think that's a very good deal that we will give. We're the best on the NHS. The average cost of a house was about 3 times the average salary. They were very, very affordable. But now it's about 8 to 10 times the cost of an average salary. The housing market has got completely out of balance. There's simply an issue of supply and demand. And we hear from all the parties we're going to build way more houses than we have at the moment. It's about 150,000 a year is the amount that's been built over the last 20 years or so. It's not going to happen this time. It hasn't happened for the last 20 years. It's not going to happen again. But the reason is that it's got so out of balance is because of a huge population increase. And that's mostly due to rapid net immigration. There's been 4 million net immigration since 1997. All those people need to be housed somewhere, and that's driven up demand without bringing the supply in, and the supply isn't going to come. What we have in UKIP is a policy of bringing immigration back into balance. It's going to take 20 years to get the housing market back into balance because it's taken 20 years to get it so out of balance. We've got to start somewhere. You know, if we don't, the population of this country is going to be 80 million by 2050. That's simply unsustainable. There simply aren't enough homes, and there never will be for 80 million by 2050. So we've got to be honest about this, and UKIP are, and we will deal with it. But I do worry about Theresa May's speech. Some of it was good, but she seemed to indicate that we might have transition arrangements in many areas for an unlimited and unspecified number of years. And people voted to come out. We want our fishing waters back. We want to control our borders. We want to come out of the single market, and we want to do it in as quick a time as possible.
Okay,
so we need to get on with it.